Hey everybody, it's Jamie from Lemon Rebellion. I'm here today talking with Ixchel Lunar. She is a decolonial time witch and founder of Initiated Leaders Fellowship. She trains edgewalkers to decolonize and reclaim their time so that they can skip the collapse and liberate their flow and dismantle the systems of brutal productivity. Ixchel, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's just a delight to be here.
I want to tell everyone a few more details about you because I think you're such a fascinating and interesting person. I'm really excited also about what you're going to talk about at Lemon Rebellion. So for those of you that don't know Ixchel yet, she was also the first Latinx vice mayor of Sonoma County. And in 2011 to 12, she ran for Congress, which is so cool. You're also a certified peak performance coach, which is exciting. And I love this description that you've shared with us about yourself. She says, at a mighty 4'10", she's a light-skinned, mestiza, indigiqueer, Mayan, French, and Scottish, vision-impaired and neurodistinct woman and a survivor of significant childhood trauma. You are fascinating and an incredible woman. I'm so glad we've connected, and I'm thrilled to have you at Lemon Rebellion. You're going to be talking to us about how to decolonize our time. Tell us more. What does that mean?
Yeah. So growing up, I definitely noticed, being neurodistinct, that my perception of time was very different from people around me. I found that I ran late according to dominant culture, and really struggled to have the sense of time that other people had. And it really sort of became the thing that was used against me. I found that when I was in elementary school, I had to run to catch the bus, or I missed the bus and I had to walk to school. I was a latchkey kid. I'm a Gen Xer, right? We know what that's like. So, it was really this challenge of really navigating the world and trying to understand how my experience of time dilation, how we experience time, the temporal pacing was very different from how others experience that. And growing up, I realized that because of that, I had to sort of make it very front and center in order to show up and be present for the things that I was required to do. Later, through some work with feminist marketing coach Kelly Deals, she really put out this idea around the concept that the things that are used against us are actually our source of power. And when I really started to understand that how much of how I was engaging in my culture growing up, and then other cultures that I started to travel the world, was how we experience time and how much time can harm us, especially colonial time. And so I really started to unpack the distinction between colonial time and Indigenous time. I grew up in a multicultural household. My grandmother raised me from a very young age. She's also mestiza, and so learning that sort of nuance from her, and then being able to start to see that as I was traveling through Latin America and how people experience time, really opened up what I came to understand was really something distinct about how I see the world and how I experience the world and how I can help others to shift their relationship with time.
Yeah, very interesting. I have so many questions. I think first I'd like to start with what does decolonialization mean within this context of time, and what are the different kind of perspectives from your experience within that?
Yeah, so colonial versus Indigenous, right? There's very different ways that we embody the world. In a colonial sense, colonization is really about disrupting our relationship with the land and people, and dividing, conquering, right? It's a very dominator culture mentality. And part of that basis of colonization is a control of time, down to the minute, down to the second, the Gregorian calendar, and all of that being very separate from actually the natural rhythms of life, which are experienced by Indigenous. And so really decolonizing is about returning to our natural rhythms and our relationships, both with time itself, which in my culture, in my tradition, time is not a construct, it's actually an entity. It's a person, it's a living being with nuance and character and its own flow, and it's mapped out in the Mayan calendar itself, how the qualities of the day are because of time and what time has to say about that particular thing. So there's a real process around decolonization that is shifting from the aspect of dominance to one of relationship being really the key, that decolonization.
That's really, really interesting. Thank you for explaining that to us. And with this idea of the relationship we have with time, as opposed to being dominated by time or dominating time, what are some of the features of a decolonized relationship with time?
Well, when we start to do decolonial work, it can be really uncomfortable. And so I just want to start out by saying that when people just begin doing this work, there's a lot of discomfort because it bumps up against their preconceived notions that the dominator culture has instilled in us about how we're supposed to behave in the world, who has power, who doesn't. So I just want to sort of acknowledge and honor that inquiring into decolonizing is uncomfortable, but in the process of doing that, we can actually let go of those systems of brutal productivity in a way that really helps us to become regenerative and helps us to restore what can be really difficult around living in dominator culture and living in a colonized world. So, the idea that time itself in a colonial construct is not our own. It's been taken away from us because we are separated from the land, where in past 500 years ago plus, in many cultures throughout the world, we were so connected with the land because that was our source of sustenance. And by separating our source and access to food, and then divvying up our time to work in order to get money to buy food,
Right.
then it became this entire culture of domination that keeps us separated from the land, separated from access to resources that sustain us, and our relationship to the natural rhythms of life. And so it's uncomfortable to think about how much extraction of our time is really the bedrock of life in a modern society. And so we're constantly confronting how to get back to our natural rhythms while also dealing with the fact that we have to put food on the table. And it's a real dilemma.
Living within the system while not reproducing it. That's a massive challenge.
And if we're entrepreneurs, if we're leaders, if we're managers of teams, then how do we do that in a way that is also less extractive and less harmful? And so really a lot of the work that I'm doing is to help folks that are in leadership roles to confront their discomfort that is just an underlying thing, so that they can be regenerative, so that they can do less harm. And then to be able to really have momentum and build momentum when we live in an extractive culture, that time is not our own and relationships are thin. There's less of a focus on community, more focus on individualism, and that is very damaging to our nervous systems. And when we get in relationship and we're able to be in more natural rhythms, taking care of our bodies, taking care of our communities, and in working towards collective goals as leaders, then we're able to build momentum rather than what happens so much of the time is we face burnout over and over. It's very debilitating. And so this process of like really shifting our relationship with time and the people around us, I think is really vital if we're going to really be able to address things like climate chaos and the dwindling land that exists on the planet that is here to help us go into the future.
Yeah, I love it. It's a whole new way to look at how we manage, and there I am using colonial words again, how we manage time, how we are with time, how we relate to time, how we exist with time and one another to, I remember from how you've described what you do to get things done in flow without being overwhelmed by this brutal productivity of the system and the context and the way in which we work in modern society that's so disconnected from the earth, from one another, from ourselves even.
Yeah, you mentioned flow, and I have had just a wonderful relationship with flow since I was very young. My family had really had a lifestyle that really allowed it to flourish, and I'm so grateful for that, because what I came to realize is that when we are in natural relationships, flow is our birthright. It's why we exist today. If we didn't understand how to have focus to find our food when we were hunter-gatherers, we wouldn't be here. And it was this natural autotelic, which means it's very simply means we do it for pleasure. Ability to focus on whatever activity it is that we're doing, whether it be for those extreme sports people jumping out of airplanes or climbing mountains, to reading and sewing and knitting and spinning. It's just an essential piece of who we are. But unfortunately, in dominator culture, it's been manipulated to extract productivity from us. And so our relationship is very tenuous because of that, because we don't necessarily trust that flow is a safe place to be, because it has been used against us in terms of doing tasks for our employers and for our work and that sort of thing. And so I really am trying to help people to recenter flow and pleasure and rest, and that's all part of the flow cycle, which I'm so excited to share with folks in the Lemon Rebellion.
Awesome. I was just going to say thank you for that. Tell us a little bit more. What will it be like to come to your session at Lemon Rebellion? What can folks expect when they participate in your session?
Yeah, I am going to really unpack the idea of colonial versus indigenous time and what those feel like, and then talk about flow and what it is, because people might not understand. It's a real it's a state that has been studied. Neuroscience has really been excited about flow for quite a while, and of course, it's also something that's really connected with Indigenous ways of being as well. And so, there's some interesting aspects of both of those. Science is validating a lot of what Indigenous communities throughout the world have done for a really long time.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
And then lastly, I want to wrap it up with really focusing on this aspect of rest and the many ways that we can rest and support ourselves and support our community, so that we can more easily drop into flow, and so that we can have the energy and be renewed in order to really face the difficulties of decolonizing, the work of being a Jedi, which I talk about, which is justice centered, and emerging decolonizing and interconnected. And it's sort of a reframe on diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And that, you know, being able to do that work in a renewed and sustainable way is such a benefit for ourselves and for the world around us.
Yeah, awesome. Again, I'm just so pleased and grateful that you're participating in Lemon Rebellion. You're going to lead this session. I think it is wonderful to have someone explaining and representing some Indigenous wisdom and perspectives, especially on time. And thank you. I'm super excited to have you there. Any final words before we close our interview that you'd like to share with anyone who's listening or watching?
I'm just so excited. I have been talking about this work this year for the first time, really sharing it and being public with it. And the reception that I've received has been just astounding and surprising. I didn't realize how much people were craving this information. So I'm just really excited to be able to share it with everyone.
Awesome. Oh, good. Well, I'm so glad that we have a space for you to share. If again, this is Ixchel Lunar, come and hear her at Lemon Rebellion. She's going to be speaking on Friday, September 24th, our day dedicated to spiritual development and growth and connection, and definitely our relationship with ourselves and the earth and time and around us is absolutely a spiritual issue. So thank you, Ixchel. Come join us at Lemon Rebellion. Sign up at lemonrebellion.com if you haven't already, and we'll see you there for September 19th through 25th. Thanks, everyone. See you, Ixchel. Thank you.